Welcome, everyone, to the Sacred Medicine Podcast, where we destigmatize medicines of the past for a future of wellness. Today, we are talking with Greg Lake, an attorney, author, and advocate working in and around the plant medicine space, helping entheogenic churches be protected under law. And this is an amazing conversation that ranges from Greg's personal story to finding plant medicine to the work that he's doing to push the movement forward, as well as considerations for business and where we're going in the future. I hope you enjoy this podcast and listen to the very end. All right, Greg, it's so good to have you on today. For those of you who don't know, Greg Lake is an author, attorney, and advocate in and around the plant medicine space, entheogenic churches, and how you doing today, Greg?
I'm doing well. How you doing, Jake?
Oh man, so good and so blessed to be here and having a conversation with you today.
Well, now, I appreciate it. I'm honored to be here.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. I thought that maybe we could start, for those that do not know a lot about you, if you could just kind of share a little bit about your history and where you're kind of at today with your work and what you're passionate about.
Yeah, so I'm Greg Lake, attorney, author, advocate. I'm from rural Northeast Texas, grew up, had a pretty idyllic childhood. Unfortunately, around the age of 12, I started getting into drugs and alcohol, which followed me all the way up until the age 29. You know, in between then, I graduated high school, graduated college, graduated law school, was able to pass the Texas bar. So I was a highly functional addict. My mother died from a sudden heart attack at the end of my second year of law school. And so, you know, I think a lot of what happened was just pushing on and pushing a lot of that pain and hurt down that later manifested when I was around 27. My drug addiction got so bad that I had to stop practicing law. I lived homeless on the streets for almost 2 years. Until 2016, I entered long-term residential treatment at a place called Synacor. I did 32 months in that facility and basically have remained sober since, other than a few times, lapses that I've had. I've remained mostly sober for the 6 years. My foray into this realm occurred back in June 2020. I published my first book, Psychedelics and Mental Health Series, Psilocybin, one that I will say that I was guided spiritually to write through working with these medicines. Basically, within a week, I was asked online what I knew about doing entheogenic psychedelic church formation, and I was actually practicing federal maritime trial practice at the time. So doing a lot of research and writing, trial briefs, appeals. And so once I kind of started digging into this issue, after I was made aware of the UDV and the Santo Daime opinions, man, the rabbit hole still hasn't ended. So I started doing that work, which led to publishing my second book. I believe it was published in February 2021, The Law of Entheogenic Churches, which is a basic foundational text for the law in this area, which eventually led to my third book, which I just published, which is the second volume to the Law of Entheogenic Churches, except this is a deep dive into the definition of religion under the First Amendment, particularly in light of the sacramental consumption of entheogens. Between then and now, starting this foray and now, I think I've assisted probably around 35 groups across the country on helping get their documentation and structure in order to give them, the most compliance with the religious laws. Yeah, and then I'm CEO of EntheoConnect, which is a website I'm building to basically connect people in and outside of this space to reputable entheogenic churches and medicine circles, things of that nature, integration circles, things of that nature. So yeah, that's about it. That's my foray. Why I'm here today.
Yeah, I love that. And that's actually how I found you. I came back from my first few ayahuasca ceremonies personally, life was completely changed. And I got some messages that I needed to start contributing inside of the space, working inside of it. Found your books, literally read all of them in the course of a week. And it really just, it struck me as being very powerful. Just so happened to meet you the following week at a conference, which was super cool and maybe divinely inspired.
Could be.
Who knows? But so very fascinating stuff, and a lot that I want to dive into. My first question for you is, you came out of this period of your life, and you, around 2016 and 2020, you wrote your first book, correct? And you said that it was partially guided by like a spiritual vision, or could you talk a little bit about how that came to be, or that message that you got?
So when I got out of rehab, I started again to work with sacred mushrooms. Now I will tell you, I had some religious experiences with the sacred mushrooms prior to going to rehab, but once I got sober and spiritually fit through that 32 months in the facility, the nature of my experiences took on a completely different character, heavy with Egyptian motif visuals, things of that nature. Well, one night I was laying on my bed in the dark in my apartment. My apartment was completely dark, and I was having these visions of the pyramids, and an entity came out of the top. I couldn't see it, but I see a black figure, floating out of the top of the pyramid as a beam of light. And then it just struck me, that I needed to go to my living room. So I went into the living room. It manifested, I guess, within this dimension or another, was Anubis. The Egyptian god Anubis was standing against the wall. I mean, I couldn't see him with my eyes, if that makes sense. He was like completely third eye sensing this entity there. And he telepathically told me to write a book about psilocybin, and that my higher path would be revealed. So that's kind of what spurred it. And so I obviously tackled with that question for a very long time. I mean, it took me months to even convince myself that this was something that was actually real or tangential on some level, right? So, but when I figured it out for sure, I was at my friend's ranch in South Texas, and we did a mushroom ceremony in his pasture. And I'll never forget the end of we hardly didn't say anything. We had sacred silence pretty much through the whole thing. And then when we left at the end, he looked at me and he said, you need to write a book about psilocybin. And I told him nothing about any of this. He just looked at me and told me, and it's like, kind of like you were describing earlier. It was one of those moments where chills went up and down my spine. Like it was, and that was probably a few months before COVID hit. So once COVID hit, that's when I really dug in to write that first book. And then obviously, like I said, right after I published it, within a week, I was doing this work I do today.
Wow, very fascinating. I have so many questions about this, and I have so many questions about everything past, but I kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into this.
That's fine.
Because we were talking a little bit before we started this interview, and we were talking, like you said, about how do we know these messages are, shall we say, real? Like that's a hard word to use in this context, but how do we know that they're guidance and not just something we're making up, right? I'm curious, in your experience, you let yourself be guided by this and through confirmation of somebody else, and it's led on a pretty wild ride, I imagine. It seems pretty interesting how that was the start of this journey that you're on.
Yeah.
Do you see that happening with folks that you're connecting with inside of this space? Is this a common theme that you're seeing, that they're getting messages, whether it be in business or life path, that they're starting to completely go in a different direction?
I mean, to be honest with you, 9 out of 10 people I meet in the space, and those for sure 9 out of 10 professionals I meet that are starting to come over to work in this space, they all were called to this. You know what I mean? They weren't, it wasn't something they just woke. It's like literally they engaged the medicine and it spoke to them and sent them that way. And what I've noticed is that, man, there are some extremely talented and resource rich people pouring into this space on many different levels and many different, positions. But Man, it's incredible, especially with the talented, intelligent people, especially in technology, that are coming and flocking to this space, and a lot of them out of a true sense of service. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, so I think, that's just, I think people get those messages all the time, and again, it's like, it, you feel it. Not only do you sense it, you feel it, and that's how I've always known that this was, something that was meant to tell me something.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was thinking a little bit about, your training as a profession, right? In law, as an attorney, you're taught to be able to distill everything that you read to complete logic, right? And find if this, then that type statements in everything, right? How have you progressed or journeyed or hold these two states of mind at the same time? One of like extreme logic and thoroughness, and another that is very hard to explain or be controlled by logic.
Yeah. Well, I can say this. My spiritual religious beliefs and views and all that, I hold them because they explain things to me in my reality. Does that make sense? That I'm understanding this not only on a logical level, but also on a spiritual level, because spiritual principles that I know and karma and stuff like that, I see that play out right in front of my eyes, and so it kind of explains a lot of the logic. And that goes to my second point, is that a lot of the beliefs and experiences in these psychedelics, like physics, metaphysics, and these other disciplines, are starting to show that this is indeed a real thing. Alternate dimensions, beings there, stuff like it's coming around, and eventually, science and logic will be able to probably explain some of this stuff. Now, I think there still is this overarching great mystery that will never be solved, right? That we're all looking for the answer to. And again, I was talking about seeking earlier, just constantly seeking, what is this great mystery, this great beyond, but yeah, science is starting to be able to at least tangentially explain some of these things. And so that kind of also plays on how I view it in both lenses.
Yeah, for sure. That actually it brought up a book that I was reading a while ago, and I never thought I'd be reading a book with this title. I'm curious if you've ever read it before. It's called Alien Information Theory.
No, I have not.
So it's a really interesting book that talks about like what it is that in specific dimethyltryptamine is potentially doing to the structure of the brain, or really how it's perceiving and responding to information. And it's a fascinating book because it takes like these spiritual experiences or these alternate dimensions in it, and it asks like, what are we tuned into? What is our brain? What are the connections that are already established to see reality the way we see it when we're sober or in normal consciousness versus what happens with DMT affecting the neurons and the cells in the brain and what it's actually tuning to. It's very fascinating, like logical book. Yeah. But so on this point that you were bringing up here around it being a very spiritual experience, and it's helping to explain your reality. I would love if you kind of explain in a little bit more detail for everyone the work that you're doing with these entheogenic churches. So just maybe like a 30 to 60 second synopsis of the case that's currently the case of the United States entheogens and what you're positing through these books.
Yeah, so basically it's this, that under the Religious Freedom and Restoration Act, federal and then state laws, some states have Religious Freedom and Restoration Act, some don't, some constitutions protect just as much as RFRA. But through those laws, basically, again, what we do is we help people enshrine their religious rights under the law, basically helping them draft documents and start organizations, which help show that they are indeed involved in a sincere religious exercise, right? And then also on the other side of this coin, when we talk about compelling governmental interest, we're talking about safety and we're talking about substance diversion. So we also work in that realm, helping people create these policies and procedures and guidelines to help also combat what the government's burden would be in a case. And so, basically setting them up with the documentation and the structure necessary to give them the best chance at, winning if it ever went to litigation. And might I say that your religious rights exist beyond a court telling you they exist or anyone telling you exist. They exist, right? The Religious Freedom and Restoration Act just establishes that under general law, when it's law of general applicability, the government still has to prove a compelling governmental interest to overcome your right to religious freedom. And so right now, obviously, the Supreme Court in 2006 decided the UDV case, which basically said that, gave the UDV, and again, these cases are on a case-by-case basis, that the UDV could sacramentally consume and import ayahuasca. 2009, a district court in Oregon said that the Santo Daime could also do the same thing. We've had Native American peyote laws and administrative procedures for a very long time. Again, and I'll say this, the DEA tries to make the argument, well, we're a closed regulatory scheme, granting these exceptions isn't going to fit within the scheme. And the Supreme Court said, well, you've obviously been able to monitor and keep track of the peyote sufficient enough for all these Native Americans. You can do the same for this. So, yeah, that's in a nutshell what we do. And that's kind of the precedent on point. I mean, there's a lot of other cases, but I guess my academic interest has mostly lied in the question of what constitutes a religion under the First Amendment. That's what my latest book has been on, and kind of the one that I've been interested in since I started in this space.
And I'm curious, what's the response that you're seeing? So there's obviously interest from those that are starting entheogenic churches or wish to start that. I'm honestly curious, what about with your peers inside of law? What's their perspective on this style of work or this style of law? Is there animosity? Is there any anxiety that this law shouldn't be practiced? Is it complete just neutrality on the matter?
And that's with who? With my colleagues? And
so lawyers, attorneys.
Yeah, I'll say this, like a lot of lawyers support it, right? Because a lot of lawyers have sat with plant medicine or, agree that these substances are not dangerous.
Is that true? A lot of lawyers are sitting with these medicines?
Oh, yeah. Every day. Yeah, every weekend. More and more lawyers are, at least sitting with it. Now, switching up their occupation, not a lot. I venture to say me and my law partner, Ian, are probably the only two people like on a daily basis out here helping people do the church formation. Whatever, a lot of lawyers that don't understand the law, their automatic reaction is, oh my God, that's illegal. You're stupid, blah, blah. But, once you do the research and you realize that, and again, this is all changing with societal attitudes too, right? Like, a court's opinion on whether they're going to be okay with the religious use of entheogens or psychedelics is going to be persuaded a lot by the court of public opinion, right? And for the most part, psychedelics and entheogens have been getting very good press. And so, so some lawyers are, oh, that's illegal. But, one thing I'll tell you is that the people I work with are sincere. And one thing I can tell you about sincere religious practitioners is they don't, not that they completely disregard the law, but when it comes to actually exercising their rights, they would rather do it and potentially risk prosecution than to not do it. And to me, that's the hallmark of a sincere practitioner. So, my work is literally just assisting them and putting their best foot forward should anything ever occur, right? But we must remember that most people, probably 99% of people that come to me have already been practicing for quite some time, and intend to continue to practice to the future, regardless of whether I help them with documents or not. But they feel best and more secure having some documentation in order. So that's why they come to me.
Of course.
Because my expertise.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have two questions. First is a short one. Why do you think it is that more lawyers are starting to sit with these medicines? Do you think it's why do you think that is?
No, I mean, I can just tell you because the legal profession is a very stressful profession. It can take a lot out of you spiritually. A lot of it leads to addiction. family issues. And so, yeah, it's just lawyers, kind of like I'm not comparing, but like veterans as a demographic, like they've undergone a lot of very stressful stuff, and let me comment real quick on the veterans is that, veterans are coming to these medicines and ceremonies at a record number, and taking the gun out of their mouth. You know what I mean? And so that's a very important demographic for our movement, and one that I encourage all my people to help cater to through scholarships or even allowing veterans sit for free. And there's a lot of great organizations in the U.S. that have been set up to collect money to help veterans sit in ceremony. So very important demographic. But back to the original point is that, yeah, lawyers, it's a very stressful, hard job for a lot of them, and lawyers are kind of free thinkers in a sense, you know what I mean? So they hear about these, a lot of them actually go to South America. Some of them sit here. There are neurosurgeons that I know that sit in ayahuasca in the U.S. every weekend. It's like there's some very intelligent, talented people being called to these medicines, and that's why I have a lot of faith in this movement overall, is that I see the caliber of people being called and showing up and answering. It looks good.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. One, that I find that there's like these different pockets of individuals that are getting called into the space, and some are that have massive amounts of trauma or anxiety or living these lifestyles that like really are incredibly disconnected from where their soul knows it needs to be. And then there's also like this amazing group of folks that are bringing skills and infrastructure and just like this. It's a very fascinating thing. Like it's not just facilitators. It's not just shamans. We're seeing like technologists. We're seeing business people enter this space and want to do it in an ethical way, a way that preserves the culture and those that have held these medicines for hundreds, thousands of years. It's a very interesting time, and I've never really seen in my short life, I've never really seen a space that is just so incredibly powerful with the groups of people that are coming in.
Yeah, I went to a networking event the following week, or actually the same week that I got back from Salt Lake City, and it was for psychedelic leaders, and man, it was incredible energy at that place. And you could just see all the different projects and ideas getting hatched right in front of your eyes, and just know that some incredible things are going to come out of it.
Yeah, I bet. Well, that's pretty incredible. So going back to these entheogenic churches, the work that you're doing with them, helping folks establish precedents so that way they're as legally protected as possible. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. One's kind of out of left field a little bit, but it's something I wanted to ask at the beginning, and I'm really curious on your take. So, coming from your particular story of becoming an attorney, but also struggling with an addiction, and just having that be part of your origin story. How do you feel like that affects your perspective of this space? What some may classify, right, as drugs, Schedule 1 drugs, which I don't think either of us here view them as necessarily Schedule 1 drugs, but instead as like sacraments and very sacred medicines. How do those two kind of pieces of the story fit together? Is it tough for you to navigate that in any way, and with the dominant cultural narrative about these medicines?
Hell, I mean, I'll tell you, my sister will barely talk to me because of the work I do. I deal with it all the time. I don't, I got to live and stand in my truth. I know facts about these substances that tell me that them being Schedule 1 is wrong and stupid, and it's had a very prolific toll on our society, these drug laws, you know what I mean? And if my life's mission is to undo some of them and people get healing along the way, so be it. That's it. But I deal with it, and maybe it's hard to jive. Some people just don't want to listen. But there's nothing I can do. I tell you, my general impression though is that 7, 8 out of 10 people who are given the facts would probably be willing to change their opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
is there any type of like conflicts, or is it difficult being under the bar and being public about your use with these medicines?
All I can say is that it's my religious practice. You know what I mean? So look, if they want to persecute me for my religious practice, well, I won't be the first in history and definitely won't be the last. But I tell you, I'm going to stand on what I believe is true and right in this world, you know, like, yeah. Not that I haven't had any issues, man. I mean, look, they would need to show that it's somehow interfered with, you know, me representing my clients. And I think they're not going to be hard pressed to find somebody who I represent now that's prepared to get up and say that. You know, because it actually is the opposite. Like, I'm connect with my clients, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm just curious if they did ever tried to say something that this was affecting your work, or that you were in breach of you know, the standards of the bar. Does your defense or the defense that you're preparing for these entheogenic churches, does that also basically your same defense against the bar?
No, because there are no standards for the bar. There are no constitutional principles or anything like that,
right?
That they have to abide by. You know, some state bars are worse than others. You know, but you know, I don't know what to tell them. You know, other than it's my religious practice, and when I feel called, I go answer nature. You know. That's it. And no one's been hurt in the process. Like, I don't see what the issue would be, you know. And, you know, again, as these things gain acceptance, I mean, you know, look, I'm sure when psilocybin therapy becomes legal, there will be tons of lawyers and doctors, other professionals flocking it, you know.
Do you think that they're waiting for that more,
there's probably
like,
some
federally
people that
or state
are,
level?
Yeah, there are people that are, but I tell you, there's a lot of people who are looking now, you know, who are being called now. And we see those people showing up in droves to the ceremonies every weekend, right? And it's a sense of community. It's a place where, you know, the only requirement is just to be your true, authentic self. You know, that's all people want. For the most part, I've seen at these circles, you know, these ceremonies. And so people get that. And, you know, once they go one time and connect with people on that level, you know, they're going to be part of the community. It's just natural.
Where do you see these? Let's just say that it becomes much more regularly accepted. And instead of preparing defenses federally and at the state level, you know, these entheogenic churches are accepted. It's even more commonplace. What do you think the effect on society business is so prevalent and such a big part of our society in the US. What do you think the implications are on society, on business, on our infrastructure?
Yeah, well, I can say this. I would expect more eco-friendly laws and policies. And the reason I say that is the research shows that, you know, at least as it relates to psilocybin, which we know is very similar to almost all entheogens, natural ones anyways, have the tendency to increase nature relatedness, right? And so, you know, and my theory on a lot of this is that a lot of this is Mother Earth calling to us and speaking to us to a degree through these natural earth sacraments. And so I do think that would be one consequence. I say consequence for a good one out of it, in my opinion. You know, people are just going to be living differently, more community minded, you know, things of that nature. Man, I see it's all good. I mean, I don't see people like this becoming a problem in their life. Does that make sense? That like, yeah, people tend to make some drastic life decisions after having a profound experience, religious experience on these sacraments, but like they're going to live a happier life, you know, and more power to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's I've seen it in my own life. Like it's completely changed a lot of the things that I care about, the things that I'm interested in, the future that I have for not just myself, but the world that I see around me. It's become much more integrated into preservation of and restoration of the world that is so precious, but also a desire to be more harmony in nature. Like my soul with nature, to execute my mission in relationship with nature. So that way it's not separated anymore. It's in consideration of, and perhaps even synergistically working together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And so, and again, I think that, in my opinion, the climate issue is probably one of the biggest one, if not the biggest one, that we as a race, human race, is going to have to confront probably fairly soon. And I'm hoping that these entheogens can prepare people to stand up and support reasonable stuff to help preserve the planet,
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. I was watching a TED Talk the other day from I think it's Paul Stamets. He's talking about mycelium mushrooms, and he's speaking about their ability to clean up these gases, how they embedded mycelium and mushrooms in these piles of like trash and waste, and how the air was being purified by these fungi, as opposed to just these static piles. And even beyond that, what they were doing is not only cleaning the air, they started to create ecosystems of life around them, from larvae to birds to like life coming to be because of the power of these mushrooms, and they're just doing their thing. They're cleaning up the world, which is it just blew my mind to think of the many different use cases that there are for these medicines, not only for ourselves, for our mental, emotional, spiritual health, but also their ability to transform the world. Yeah,
no, that's right. And it's that is, like I tell people all the time, this is all the ability of these substances to effectuate these types of experiences and beliefs and post-journey changes in one's life. It's all been documented in the research. There's really, not saying it's going to do that 100% of the time, but research shows that it's pretty damn consistent in making these types of changes in people's lives if they approach them in the right way with the proper intention, things of that nature.
So speaking of research, as someone practicing law around this, and either that or just on personal interest, what would you like to see as far as research to either bolster the support of these entheogenic churches, or even just seeing them brought more into culture?
Well, and I would love, and again, I've made the call several times, but any kind of academics, man, I would love to have some studies, and I could make it happen where we could hand out some questionnaires and stuff before and after these ceremonies, and collect all kinds of data, demographic data, why they came.
Are churches, I'm sorry to interrupt, are most of these churches, are they collecting this data en masse?
No, I mean, there's probably... No, not really. I mean, most churches, you fill out a membership form when you come in, so they would probably have the demographic data, stuff like that. But as far as like written surveys as to experiences, no, that I'm aware of. Now, I could be, there might be some churches out there doing, but I haven't run into any. Most of them are waiting for academics, because they're holding ceremony. They want the academics to come up with all the materials to hand out, right? In exchange for the information. But I think it would be just a very, I think the results would just blow people's minds away.
How would that affect the legal precedents that you're working with?
I mean, in a myriad of ways. Why are you here? What type of experience did you have? What does this mean to you? All that can help show that this is indeed a religious exercise, right? That people are having these types of metaphysical experiences and receiving guidance, things like that. Demographic data, just to show who the typical person showing up at these ceremonies are. All the way to safety data. Look how many people came through these ceremonies without any adverse events. It's pretty damn compelling too, as far as like safety of the ceremony. And they could probably survey ceremony styles, different rituals, and kind of break all that down too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I love all that. And I hope that eventually academics are hearing and listening to this, because
me too.
This is really what needs to happen, in my opinion. We need to start really getting together all these different tangential fields, start collaborating, because there's so much skill, there's so much talent. There's it really just, we need to bridge the connections, which it sounds like you're doing with EntheoGenic. So that kind of brings me to that. What are you specifically doing inside that? You said that it's to connect those that are leading safe retreats and ceremonies. What's the overarching vision of EntheoGenic? What do you hope that it eventually becomes?
Well, I sure see it as an evolving thing, an expanding thing, right? I don't see EntheoGenic as being a strictly static concept or idea. Obviously, to start, we're going to have a listing of reputable entheogenic churches with integration providers, with energy workers, all these other ancillary services, right? And kind of start there. One plus to all this is that we're going to have a public comment section where people can discuss their experiences at these various places, right? To help them find the best fit for them. That's ultimately what it is. I want people to be able, for at least their first time or more, to find that good fit, place for them. And then, my other thoughts on that are, well, we should do a media company where we fly around the world and do videos related to these things, workshops, and eventually a marketplace. I would love to have a marketplace where people can sell their related wares, and other tinctures, whatever it is that they might, bring it to the marketplace and sell it there, a community-based marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like you're really using the connections that you're building as an attorney to further the space, which is amazing. From what you're seeing, what do you think are some of the pillars that need to be built out inside of the entheogenic community to really move this space forward, whether it be on the legal side, on the business side? What do you think are some of the things that are holding us back?
Yeah, well, for one, as far as on the legal end and just general goodwill and towards the space, we need some type of accountability board. A lot of ideas have been thrown around, and there are a few small organizations here and there, but we need a good, solid, some type of board or nonprofit to help set standards and enforce standards, whichever way they could, as far as serving these sacraments. Not that of course, there's stories of abuse, and I would never discredit them or anything like that. I don't think it's a huge problem, but I think we need it because I see a lot of people out here, serving, and I'm not here to judge anybody's credibility or ability to serve medicines, but there are people out here that are trying to serve people sacraments that probably have no business doing so. And so for the sake of safety and just getting people to a place where they can have that breakthrough experience, I think that some type of accountability board needs to be created. And again, there's a lot of ideas brewing. There's a few small organizations, but there hadn't been one yet that's kind of taken charge. And so we're going to do this. So I hope one or more of those organizations pops up. On the business end, a lot of the people I see, and this is probably a good thing, a lot of people I see that serve or hold ceremony aren't very good business people. I can't hardly find any entheogen-friendly accountants. So if we could have more of those people enter the space and lend a helping hand, would be great. I think that'd be great because, again, we want to make sure that as we grow and expand, that we're compliant with the IRS, that we're doing everything, right. And so more professionals to help out in that regard would be nice. As a lawyer, I run into a lot of nonprofit tax questions all the time that I can't answer. And I don't specifically know any accountant who's say, yeah, send your people here, I'm plant medicine friendly or whatever. I mean, I'm sure they're out there. I just haven't encountered any yet, but we could definitely use some of those people.
Awesome. So in your mind, it sounds like some of the professional services and support of these organizations is really going to be key to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. Awesome. I love all of that. Well, I appreciate all of your insight, all of your thought critically on both law, where the state of this space is right now. I think that you've got a great perspective, just being able to talk so many people in completely divergent areas of the United States in particular, and I just want to appreciate you for sharing that, for sharing your story and being open with all the information and things that you're learning.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, I'll say this, these podcasts are very important. One, for documenting this as it evolves, and two, for just getting the word out and letting people, because, these days people aren't as wanting to read as much as they will listen or watch a video. And so, getting this type of material out in this medium is very important, because it's going to reach more people. Yeah,
I definitely agree with you. Well, is there any closing thoughts that you would like to leave with our viewers, whether they be professionals inside of the viewers or those that are just consuming the sacraments or anything in between?
Well, yeah, I would like to say this is that, don't be fearful to exercise your, if you're approaching these substances on a spiritual, religious level, do not be scared to practice your religion, right? And don't ever be sorry for it. Exercise your rights, because I get a lot of people who are kind of on the fence about it. And here's my thoughts on that. If you find yourself thinking you might want to start an entheogenic church or some type of organization or circle, and you're having some reservations about it for whatever reason, it's best just not to even start until you can resolve those, because I think what's best for the space at this time is just brave people. A lot of brave people to stand up, not scared to speak their truth, and doing things wholeheartedly. And ultimately what I've seen is that, in the church space, the people who are more serious, more formal, more, involved in these rituals and ceremonies, the less likely they are to be messed with, right? Because, a lot of this is sincerity. So if you're holding a very structured, detailed ceremony, obviously that goes a long ways to show, that you're actually engaging in a religious exercise. And from what I've seen, is that really the government, when they know that you're going to be able to meet your burden, for the most part, it's they abandon prosecution at least as it relates to the religious defense. So, yeah, that's my thing. I just, people just live and stand in your truth, and just speak it, live it. And again, we all have fears, and I don't want to make this sound like I'm bashing people who might have reservations or fears about any of this. It's just, before you jump in and get extremely involved, realize that it's just like anything in life. There's a little bit of risk and potentially a lot of reward, and so just understand that calculus and move forward accordingly.
Absolutely. And I think that the call to action here is for folks that are brave, that want to stand in their belief. Yeah. And that's what's going to move the space forward. And in any space, any industry, any belief system, it requires bravery and standing firm. So thank you for that call to action. Everyone, please, if you're the slightest bit interested in Greg's books, I highly recommend, as somebody who's read them all, pick them up. They're fantastic. Greg's done a great job at creating, the precedents that I think can make someone feel more rooted in their belief system. I know it did for me personally. So please make sure to go check that out. I'll put links to those, Greg specifically, ways to contact him, down below in the description. And thank you so much for listening. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. It's great to be here.